Welcome to One to One. Whatever happened to the presidential candidacy of Ron Paul? We'll ask Congressman Paul that question. We're in Bowling Green at Western Kentucky University for a conversation with the candidate, congressman, doctor, and author, and favorite guest of Colbert, Leno, Stewart, and others. Ron Paul is next on One to One. Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
What is the status of your presidential campaign?
Well, the status is that it continues because there are actually two campaigns. The one campaign is to get the maximum number of delegates and go and have an influence at the convention. And early on, it was to do our very, very best. But there's also a campaign which is called a revolution, and that is to change this country and to change our party, the Republican Party. And that's ongoing and continuing. I talked to a leader of one of our meetup groups the other day. Matter of fact, she called in on a radio talk show, and she says, our meetup group meets every single week still. And they said they're now engaged in promoting a cause and local politics, and they're very involved in trying to influence the Republican Party. So this continues, and we expect to have a presence and be as visible as possible at the National Convention. And we will have a good rally up there, hopefully a grand rally of our supporters will show up in Minneapolis, St. Paul.
Well, one of the things you're already falling into the vernacular that a lot of us are still becoming comfortable with, a meetup group, and I want to talk to you about a lot of those things that you learned throughout this campaign. Contrast, if you will, for me, sir, your 1988 presidential bid as the Libertarian Party choice to this one, how it's changed in the time, the decade that has passed as far as the internet, the way you've been treated personally. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, there's a lot of difference. Philosophically, we have advanced a lot since '88, and certainly we have advanced a lot since I first went into Congress in the 70s, which means to me that a lot more people are aware of and understand what free markets are all about and why we should be following the Constitution. So the groundwork has been laid by many intellectual groups throughout these many years. But there's been a big difference because I was in a major party, and I got in, at least into these debates, which made all the difference in the world. Even though I was marginalized, given limited amount of time, and made fun of, people saw through that and got very excited, went to our website and became, you know, very, very active in the campaign. But then the next thing was there was a greater need right now for a change in government because government is not working very well. We have perpetual war and a recession that's leading possibly to a depression. You put all that together, and then all of a sudden you don't need Main Street media. Sure, they would occasionally talk about me, but it was more or less to laugh. But then the people who were looking for the truth would go to the internet, and they spontaneously organized. When you think that we had 1,700 meetup groups organized on their own, and they're the ones who did the fundraising. We didn't have a fundraising operation.
Yeah, talk about the fundraising, because you set records which I think are still established.
Yeah, for one day they said, well, let's have a money bomb. And they got together and they communicated around the country, and they sent in over $6 million. When my wife and I were celebrating our 51st anniversary, they said, oh, let's help celebrate. So they said, everybody sent in $51. They raised over $1 million just to help celebrate our anniversary.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of thing that was spontaneous. The excitement, and I've said this quite frequently, and that is, it really wasn't about me. They got excited about the message. But, you know, it used to be that I would be quite satisfied to say that it wasn't about me. But when they started applauding that, then I got a little bit nervous, you know.
The message, but the movement, too. I mean, it was about that.
That's the only thing that is important as far as I'm concerned, because it's bigger and growing. And the difference compared to 1988 is totally dramatic. The laws are so biased against third parties. It's hard to get attention, get into debates. It's hard to get on ballots. So this was a tremendous opportunity, and the time was ripe.
Well, I think you got maybe treated a bit unfairly in some instances, but on the other hand, you were in major magazines, you were all over television, you were on cable shows. This is, before it even really got started, this is from the New York Times Sunday magazine. I mean, it was a huge article that I'm not sure every candidate got this much ink that you did. Here's one paragraph I want to read you. There is something homespun about Paul, reminiscent of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. He communicates with his constituents through birthday cards, August barbecues, and the cookbooks his wife puts together every election season, which mix photos of grandchildren, gospel messages, and neighbors' recipes for a Velveeta cheese fudge and cherry Coke salad. He's even listed in the phone book, and his constituents call you at home. So they were, I guess, trying to sort of humanize you in a way, or warm you up to the rest of the nation that didn't know Ron Paul?
No, and I think we have to be very grateful for that type of coverage. The supporters are more critical, of course, of the media coverage than I've been, because I've always been grateful for that. And when it comes to some of those things, you know, politics is a little bit more than just philosophy. I kidded my wife when she came up with this idea of a cookbook. I said, what would you want to do something so silly as this for? I said, they just want to hear my speeches on the Exchange Stabilization Fund and the IMF. And, of course, I had tongue-in-cheek, because it turns out that approach was every bit, if not the most popular thing that we did, but it's a vehicle to help soften the viewpoint to talk about things serious.
Yeah. Tell me about your experience on Meet the Press with Tim Russert.
Well, I found it interesting. I have not finally decided whether I did well or did badly. I've heard both comments, but I felt good about it when I came off. Then I had people criticize to some degree, but I enjoyed it, and I liked the one-on-one interviews. Robert Schieffer, I think it was. I enjoyed his a lot more, because he was
Bob Schieffer on Face the Nation.
Yeah, he's more academically inclined, and Tim Russert sort of a got you type of thing. But I still enjoyed it.
Is it fair for people like Russert, and he did this, to go back 2 decades or more and pull out a quote that is attributed to you that may not even be accurate or truthful?
Well, I guess I don't know whether it's the fair or unfair. It seems to be frivolous and dwelling on things that are so much less important than what is my position on the war. I don't even think we hardly talked about the war on that program. Seems to me, why doesn't he contrast? Why doesn't he come up and look at what I said 5 years before we went to war, when they changed the policy in 1998 with the Iraq Liberation Act? No, he wouldn't do that. It's to go back 20 years and say, oh, I got you, you know, instead of showing where you might have said something that is very, very consistent, and maybe contrast with what all the other candidates say. He didn't dwell on the fact that I was the only Republican taking a constitutional position on the war, that you're not supposed to go to war without a declaration. We didn't touch on that. So in that case, it comes up very short on a really good interview.
Well, I want to talk about some issues, and I want to talk about your book, your new book, which is doing quite well. But before we go there, it's just phenomenal to me to realize, by going to ronpaul2008.com, which I invite everybody to do, because you were on so many videos, you were on so many cable shows, and these people that, and I also read at the beginning of this New York Times magazine article that on some of these folks that you were going to be interviewed by, you didn't even know who they were. Jon Stewart of The Daily Show, or Stephen Colbert, or some of the others. I think it was Jon Stewart who said, wait a minute, you're sane, you have good policy, you make good decisions, you're smart. What are you doing being a politician, I think he said to you on the couch there. And was it Colbert who had you raising your hand about...
about what I was for and against and all that sort of thing.
But what did you learn about these other internet phenomenons like Facebook and Meetup? You mentioned that a few minutes ago, and Justin TV. You know, all of those things that are listed, and that you are really, as I said, the darling of the internet geeks. Right. You really are.
I was vaguely aware of it, but came to the conclusion that we had a political equalizer. I mean, it just helped so much, and it was so spontaneous that if you have a right idea whose time has come, with this vehicle, the message can be spread. So it's very encouraging. So I come away after 1 year or so of this much more optimistic than I was at the beginning, you know, because I've been plodding along this way for 30 years, and I always figured that's exactly what I would do for the rest of my life.
Really? Did you think that?
Plod along, and actually...
You didn't expect any of this?
No, I did not. I thought my role in my political life would be to speak out, to present a case for liberty, and to show that I speak clearly and vote that way and get reelected and set a standard. So therefore, it requires sometimes voting by myself, which I've done quite a few times. And that was always seen as a political liability in Washington. It turned out it was the political asset.
Mm-hmm.
People would say, my goodness, he actually voted that way, you know, and that became a very valuable asset.
One of the things on the website that we talked about just before we started our conversation was what happened at some of the rallies, and you can witness that for yourself by watching these, and I did that just in the last few days. The University of Minnesota, for example, right. That was a crowded hall of 4,000 or 5,000 people of all ages, of all color. And it was incredible, the response that you got by walking out on that stage.
Yeah.